To the big story of the day and a Fox News alert. The fight to save women's sports. It's officially reached the Supreme Court. Justices hearing arguments today in two cases, both concerning state laws banning boys from participating in girls' sports. And a glimpse at where things stand right now. It seems like the court is likely to rule in favor of the states, but more on that. And a look inside the courtroom in a moment. First, let's zoom in on the two cases. Idaho's Little versus Hecox. It's a law challenging Idaho's ban preventing transgender college athletes from competing. And West Virginia versus BPJ, which challenges the state ban blocking a transgender middle schooler from girls' sports. Now, both states appealing when the laws were struck down, of course, by lower courts as unconstitutional, which leads us to today and the question at hand, whether state bans in Idaho and West Virginia violate Title IX and the Constitution's 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause. Let's dive in. Title IX prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex education programs receiving federal financial assistance. Athletics are considered an integral part of an institution's education program and are therefore covered by this law. Then, the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. It reads in part, "Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of laws." Now, today, we got a real sense inside the courtroom of where the justices sit on this issue of transgender athletes. Justice Sonia Sotomayor today said it's clear that she sees this as sex classification. Now, it's important to note that discrimination is not prohibited by the United States Constitution, not sex classification, not even race discrimination. However, if a law discriminates, even on the basis of race, a state can do so if it satisfies a burden. In this situation, Sotomayor says banning transgender athletes is sex discrimination.
I don't know how you can say sex classification is not being challenged. There's no question here that a male who identifies as a female, but it's a male, is being excluded from a female sport, correct?
That's correct.
All right. By its nature, that's a sex classification. And all sex classifications, we have said repeatedly in our case law, require intermediate scrutiny.
So a state has to have a very good excuse to discriminate on the basis of race. If a state is discriminating on the basis of sex, there's a little less of a burden, but still a burden carried by the state. And that's the burden being pushed by Justice Sotomayor. Meantime, common sense prevails when you hear from Justice Alito, because he says, how can it be sex discrimination when we can't even define sex?
What does it mean to be a boy or a girl or a man or a woman?
We do not have a definition for the court. And we don't take issue with we're not disputing the definition here. What we're saying is that the way it applies in practice is to exclude birth sex males categorically from women's teams, and that there's a subset of those birth sex males where it doesn't make sense to do so according to the state's own interest.
Well, how can a court determine whether there's discrimination on the basis of sex without knowing what sex means for equal protection purposes?
We so rarely get to hear the arguments, the persuasion, the techniques, the logic. We so rarely get to hear the personalities of the justices. Forgive me if I'm a little bit entertained on something when it is with the most powerful or 9 of the most powerful people in the land, to see exactly how calm, how logical, how rational are these unelected justices. Justice Amy Coney Barrett, she dove further into the idea of transgender.
Since trans boys can play on boys' teams, how would we say that this discriminates on the basis of transgender status when its effect really only runs towards trans girls and not trans boys?
We understand the point, and I think that might be relevant to for example, animus point, right? There were not a complete exclusion of transgender people. There was an exclusion of transgender women.
You see, you get the point. It's not really sex discrimination if you can't define sex, and it's not really discrimination against transgender people if you're only really focused on transgender girls, a.k.a. boys keeping them from participating in girls' sports. But as I mentioned, the window into these people doesn't get more absurd than when you hear from Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. Remember, she couldn't even define a woman during her confirmation hearing. And now she says we're really dealing with not one, but two classes of discrimination.
To play on a team that matches their gender identity, cisgender women can do it, transgender women cannot. And so we do appreciate a distinction, I think, that is being drawn on the basis of your gender status, gender identity status, trans or cis, right? It's like a second order discrimination, right? The first order is separating male from female.
Right.
The second order is separating transgender women from cisgender women, right?
Respectfully, I would disagree.
No.
It really is a word salad that belongs more in a women's studies classroom at Howard than it does on the sitting bench of the United States Supreme Court. My next guests were in that room, the Supreme Court. Alliance Defending Freedom CEO Kristen Waggoner and former soccer captain for the West Virginia State University Yellow Jackets, Lainey Armistead. Ladies, thank you for being with me here today. Kristen, you were in the courtroom. You heard the arguments. What did you think? Which way were the justices leaning towards these bans on transgender athletes?
Well, I'm very optimistic at the results and was so pleased to stand and represent Idaho and West Virginia alongside their attorneys general, as well as women like Lainey, who was a party in the case. What we know is that the ACLU was in fast retreat. They were unable, as you already noted, to be able to even define what a man or woman is. And it's awfully hard to prove sex discrimination when you can't even define what sex means.
No, it does seem. It's just a very simple concept that gets stirred up and muddied through modern lingo like cis and trans. It's a very simple proposition, Lainey, one that I know that is very near and dear to your heart, which is whether or not boys can be able to join the team and dominate over girls.
It's absolutely true that is exactly what was going on today. It was hard to keep track of the references to girls and boys, but what we know are that boys have physical advantages over girls, whether they've taken testosterone suppressants or puberty blockers. The same is true no matter what. The other thing, Will, and again, this is why Lainey's presence is so important. What you didn't hear enough of today in the courtroom were the real women that are hurt by this. Where are those women showing up in this hearing? And that, for example, in the West Virginia case, BPJ, the male athlete, displaced 420-some girls 1,100 times and took 57 medals. Let's talk about the girls that were denied justice and have been denied equal opportunity.
Yeah, Justice Brown Jackson did discuss two orders of discrimination. She defined them as one being male versus female. Lainey, this question is to you. That is a form of discrimination that has been emboldened or embraced by Title IX. The idea that we will separate men from women, that we should protect the idea of women's sports. And that thing that you did, which was play soccer for West Virginia, and you now fight for, is under threat, if not for the Supreme Court.
Yes, Title IX was designed to protect and ensure that women had equal opportunities, and it was not designed to kick us off of podiums. It was not designed to take away our spots. It was not designed to take away our opportunities for scholarship, and it certainly was not designed to risk harm to our girls.
Yeah, it turns the entire idea on its head of Title IX. That's a fascinating statistic, Kristen, that one athlete displaced 400 some odd females from medal stands, positions on the team, continuous competitions throughout that one athlete's career. We'll see what they say at the Supreme Court. Thank you, ladies.